Every Night is Game Night, episode 185. Liz from Beyond Solitaire takes over. Yo, my peoples, what's up? Welcome back to Every Night is Game Night, the podcast that helps you get your head in the game. So I am chugging along here. Promised I would give you weekly content, but it won't be me this week. I have asked my friend, a good friend of the show, Liz from Beyond Solitaire. She has done a couple of interviews over on Beyond Solitaire. You can go check those out. The YouTube version of those, I am posting them here as podcast form, in podcast form rather. You are going to hear from David Thompson first. He is the designer of many war games, including Pavlov's House and a couple of others. They have a good conversation about design, war gaming, solo gaming, that kind of thing. And also Animal Crossing, apparently, which is something that is still beyond me. But, there you go. The second conversation is with a good friend of the show, Brady Sadler, and Liz and Brady talk about books and entertaining themselves during quarantine. So both conversations were very, very fun. Happy to give them to you. And I'll be back next week with more suggestions for gaming during this little quarantine that we're having. So until next week, hope you guys are safe and grab a game off of that shelf. And let's make every night a game night.
Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I'm here to encourage your Every Night is Game Night acquisition disorder. Today I want to talk about Veil Wraith, the latest game from Tristan Hall, designer of Gloom of Kilforth. Veil Wraith is set in the same universe, but it's a solo-specific campaign game set after the end of the world. You will explore destroyed lands, save lost souls, fight enemies, and collect lost memories of what the world used to be like. As you progress, you'll build up an increasingly powerful deck of cards, which will give you even more options within the world of the game. As is to be expected from a All or Nothing game, Veil Wraith is already sporting fantastic artwork, so if you're looking for an immersive and visually striking fantasy adventure, Veil Wraith is a game worth looking at. Check it out before the campaign ends on April 30th. Happy gaming! Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I am here with David Thompson to hang out because there is nothing better to do right now. How are you doing, David?
I'm awesome. How are you?
I am doing just fine. Honestly, I'm doing better than I really should be doing. I mean, I'm a solo gamer. I'm never bored.
That's right.
Ever.
Yeah. Life's good right now, right?
Oh, man. If it weren't these circumstances and this was just life, it'd be great.
Yeah, that's right.
And you are, I take it, working remotely right now?
Yep. I've gone to telework for 4 days a week. So I'll go to work one day, basically, just to make sure, things are still running. But that's it.
Nice. Yes, I'm in the process of attempting to teach lots of teenagers over the internet.
Yeah. Well, telework is interesting for me, too, because, I think I mentioned to you, everything I do at work is classified, right? So teleworking from home is a bit of a challenge. So we'll see. It's basically how much unclassed training can I possibly do right now?
Right. But you are double dipping, sir, because some of that training that you're doing also applies to board games, which is what we all really care about. Am I right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we were talking about what am I doing while I'm at home. And once I get past all the obligatory bad training I don't want to do, one of the things I'm doing is a lot of ArcGIS online. So if people don't know what that is, essentially my day job, I do a lot of remote sensing and geospatial analysis type work. So looking at geospatial data, old school like cartographic kind of stuff. But what I'm really interested in is applying some of that to a game that I'm going to be working on in about a year and a half from now, right? So this is a game, World War II game, Battle of Mortain, where the U.S. and Germans fought in France, right? So it's a battle I've been really interested in. It's going to be part of the same series of games as Pavlov's House and Castle Itter. So it's all about a U.S., basically about a battalion worth of guys holding out on a hill against German attack for a few days.
A few days?
A few days. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, so the U.S. moved into Mortain, the little town of Mortain in France, and the Germans were launching a massive counterattack. And so they had to go through Mortain, and they needed to take this hill. And the U.S. 30th Infantry Division had just moved in, and there was, like I said, about a battalion's worth of guys on the hill, and they wind up having to defend that hill, basically being cut off for the better part of almost a week. So it's about them holding that hill, and then the sort of, like in Pavlov's house, you have this sort of strategic or operational support. So they do have some support, but very, very little. They're mostly cut off.
Where do you find out about these battles? I love that you have managed to make an entire series out of these extremely dramatic fighting and defense scenarios. So is it just that you read so much about World War II that something catches your interest? Or like, how do you look for these?
Yeah, so I guess you could say, like, hey, what are some famous last stands in World War II or something? And maybe you hit on some of them. But it's usually like I'm just reading through something and it'll catch my eye. I'm like, oh, okay, this is cool. This one specifically, though, so I was kind of predisposed to this one because it's the same unit that I based Undaunted on. Oh. And there's actually a couple of Undaunted scenarios about this same battle. So, but now we're taking it to, a full game about this. So
that is awesome. Undaunted was great, so I'm excited to see more with that unit. And so I'm curious about how ArcGIS is going to play into this. So I actually started a little bit of ArcGIS training when I was in grad school, because I used to do archaeological survey work. So I worked the total station, and I took little points of like where walls were and where important points were on the site. And I was planning to, learn how to use ArcGIS so that I could store information about what we'd found, and I could make really cool maps. And so I'm actually kind of jealous that you're going to get to do all of this training, because it was something that I kind of left behind when I left academia. Yep. That is so awesome. So what are you hoping that ArcGIS is going to add to the experience of your game?
Yeah, so if you think about it, if you open up a history book or whatever and you're looking at a battle, usually you'll get one or two maps, right, of unit disposition. And you can try to infer a lot from that. But usually it's it's always a static map, right? And it's hard to understand, like, okay, I get that this unit was in this position, but if the battle took 7 days and all these units are moving around, I don't really understand what's going on. So the intent here is that I will take all the different sources I have. So on my floor, I have 14 books about the Battle of Mortain, right? So I'm going to take all of those sources, and what I'll do is I'll create what we call structured data. So it'll be, if you can imagine an Excel spreadsheet, right? Every single row of data will be this unit, its echelon, its whatever designator, all of this columns and columns of data about a specific unit, a specific time, and a specific place. And so all of that will be structured data that I will visualize in Arc, and it will have so it'll have all the unit information, like what type of unit it was, its designator, all that kind of stuff. But the two most important attributes will be the time and the place, right? So the time, because ultimately what I want to have is a spatiotemporal map. So you can imagine like a time-lapse viewer of the Battle of Mortain, where we can track, hey, I want to track, this specific squad or platoon. Where did they go? And we could track it down to that level.
That sounds really like you, and I mean that in a great way. So you just had a successful Kickstarter campaign for By Stealth and Sea, and I remember talking to you about being concerned about which ships were in port at which times so that your game would be as historically accurate as possible. And I also know that you've done a great job of tracking down images of people who are involved in the battles that you've made games about. So honestly, this just seems true to form for me.
There's no detail too small. That's right.
I really like that. So do you feel that this is important because it enhances the experience of the game, or is it because for you, designing the game and learning about the history are so closely tied that it's just part of the fun of it for you?
Yeah, I think that for sure, right? Like I get a lot out of, I'm going to research the topic. And in this case, I have two goals. One goal is, and this is the smaller goal in this case, is that it will inform the game, right? So that'll be cool. There'll be things in the game that people will probably never really know that will be, that will harken back to this research I'm doing. I do, in this case, have another goal that's not tied to the game itself. And I'm hoping to come out of this with, I'll publish something. I don't know what the journal or something, where I say, hey, if you're studying historical battles and you want to be able to track units like this is the methodology we used, right? So I'm working with a couple of data scientists and analytic methodologists to bring all of our sort of resources together against this, and hopefully at the end of it we'll say, hey, if you want to do something similar, this is how you go about doing it. And I have never looked into that on the unclass, like the normal world, like what that would even mean. And so that'll be a whole new experience. But hopefully we can come out of that, help others do the kind of, and in a perfect world, other people would take that methodology. We would see more battles where we could dig deeper, right?
So I really wonder if there are archaeologists looking at stuff like this already. Like I'm trying to decide. I'm trying to figure out if I know a guy. Because this sounds like exactly the sort of thing that, a practicing historian or archaeologist would be really, really, really into. And also, this sounds like something that'd be fun for you, because, you already like to publish guides that go with your games. Yeah. So there was a guidebook for Pavlov's House. Did you publish one for ITER, or because that book was out?
Yep.
You did? Okay. Yeah. And then I know there will be one for By Stealth and Sea, because that is some interesting historical information. So that's awesome. I really like it when games meet actual historical practice and talking about something that's more than just a game. So that is super exciting. So what are you playing right now in the middle of all of our free time?
I was just talking to Harold about this. So right before all the current insanity hit, I had gone down to Nashville to Tennessee Game Days, which is an awesome convention. It's pretty, like maybe 1,500 people. I don't know, but it's awesome. That's where when I used to live in Huntsville, Alabama, that's where me and my buddies would go to. That's where the big local convention. So I get to meet back up with them, and they're not war gamers. So we were playing a bunch of Euros. So that was cool. I played Terraforming Mars for the first time.
How did you like it?
I'd never played before. It was good. I liked it more than I thought I would. Right. So it was good. I got to play Orleans, which I love.
I really like Orleans. I like that one a lot.
Yeah. Robinson Crusoe, which is unbelievably fantastic, right?
Yes. Did you live?
Oh, no. God, no.
Of course not.
No way. And Fox and the Forest Duet, which is cool.
You know what? I bought that to try to play it with my boyfriend. Will we like it?
I mean, does he like trick-taking games?
Yeah.
Have you guys played regular Fox and the Forest?
No, we have not. We've played things like Diamonds and Hearts and all that stuff. Yeah. So I figured it would be fun to trick-take cooperatively. I
think it was definitely the best surprise for me, right? It was awesome. I loved it. I think you guys would like it. Yeah. It was super hard, super fun. It was good. Great teamwork. So, I think you'll dig it.
Awesome. I mean, normally I want to play, 6-hour games that no one else wants to play. At least not in my immediate vicinity.
Yeah. Now, since I've been home, all I've done is play with. Well, I've done some testing, right? On Tabletop Simulator, obviously, what I normally do. But I've been playing with the kids, so we've been playing Crusoe Crew. Do you know that?
Yeah, that's a Van Ryder, one of those game books.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's awesome. And then we've been playing Adventure Games: The Dungeon.
How's that?
It's awesome. It's really good. Yeah, the kids are loving it.
That sounds great, actually. Yeah, I mean, I'm an Omni gamer, so I'll try the full range. So that's cool. So I was thinking about something that you said, which is that you were thinking about working on this game a year and a half out. How scheduled is your design process?
Yeah, so I can tell you this. Right now, my schedule for the next couple of years is set. Right, it's up until 2023-ish.
Wow.
Just because, now part of that is because so many games that I'm working on have expansions or sequels, right? So Undaunted is scheduled through the next couple of years, War Chest, all the stuff I'm doing with DVG, those are all planned out.
Yeah.
And I can only do so much, unfortunately, because I have a day job, right?
What are those?
So that's the problem, right? I unfortunately have had to turn down a couple of people asking about doing games for them because of that. So it's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I know that like this summer I'll be finishing up Soldiers and Postmen's Uniforms, which means that next year, I know. so next year, the next DVG game will be Battle of Mortain.
Awesome. Okay, so it's going to be Soldiers and Postmen's Uniforms and then Battle of Mortain. And then there's going to be more War Chest.
That's been announced. There's another War Chest expansion on the way. I don't think they've announced the name, though, so I have to be very careful.
Oh. You can't give me the inside scoop?
How
much of your gaming schedule is classified? How much of it can I wring out of you?
I can tell you this. There have been a lot of people who have posted on Board Game Geek with their own like fan-made ideas, and there have been a ton of people who have come up with ideas that are very similar in theme to an expansion we have coming up.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So, did you design it before you looked at the fan stuff, or in response to the fan stuff?
Yeah. So here's what's funny. This is, I mean, people. I don't know if people get this or not, but the War Chest expansions, the one that came out Nobility, and the next one, those were designed like a year and a half ago, right? Mm-hmm. And so people will email me all the time, and they'll say, "Hey, I want to test your next expansion for War Chest." I'm like, the next expansion for War Chest has been done for like a year. So you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's hard to sync up with people that are interested in playtesting a game like that. A series is already. It's like Undaunted, right? So North Africa comes out in June, but we finished North Africa before the first Undaunted Normandy even came out.
Oh wow!
So
oh wow!
No.
Is there going to be more Beyond North Africa, or do you not know yet? Or do you have that finished too?
Yeah. So there will be more, right? So I keep telling you, as long as people buy it, there will be more. So we are currently finishing up what comes after on North Africa. That's what I was testing last night, as a matter of fact.
So how do you keep all of this stuff so organized? I feel like you've got a lot of irons in the fire, and I'm not complaining because...
Yeah. So one thing is my design partner for War Chest and Undaunted, Trevor Benjamin,
mm-hmm.
he and I are like best buds in the world, right? He's super close friends. So it's awesome to just get together and play with him. We keep each other straight when it comes to those games. And we have another game in the works that I can't talk about.
Come on.
I can tell you that it's with Blacklist because we've openly talked about that. So you know Adam and Brady Sadler.
I do. You're in good company. Yeah.
I know. So it's been super fun to work with them. So I'll probably get in trouble if I talk more about it, but it's with them.
I'm worth all the trouble. No, I'm kidding.
So it's good because when we're working together, obviously we keep each other in line.
Yeah.
And I will always have like a solitaire game that's my primary. So now the Best by Stealth and Sea is done.
Yeah.
I'll move on to Soldiers and Postmen's Uniform.
Right.
And then maybe there'll be like one other project. So like Sniper Elite now is done, right?
Right.
So there's always kind of like one thing I'm doing with Trevor, one or two. We'll usually be going back and forth.
Yeah.
One solitaire, and then maybe one other project.
That's awesome. So what are you reading right now historically that may be the inspiration for your next installment?
Well, so it's all more like if I'm looking around, I see a lot of Mortain stuff. I see a lot of North Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been doing a lot of stuff related to Undaunted North Africa.
Right.
That's it. So it's all Mortain right now.
Got it. Well, I'm wondering if we might be seeing a solo game set in North Africa down the line.
Ooh, wow, that would be interesting. I think so. Here's what's going to be after Battle of Mortain.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one that I've been thinking about for a couple of years, and so I've got to get it. I know when I can't stop thinking about a game, I've got to make that game.
Right.
So that game needs to be. I think at that point I will have the opportunity to say, okay, now what do I do? We're just talking Valiant Defense, right?
Yeah.
I would say that right now it's down to one of three things, and this is a combination of things I want to do and what people keep asking for.
Mm-hmm.
So what people keep asking for is a lot of people want me to do the Alamo, right?
Oh, that'd be great. I'm a San Antonio native. So
okay.
I would not complain. I've been on the 3rd grade field trip to the Alamo and the 4th grade field trip to the Alamo.
My only experience with San Antonio is basic training, right, when I was in the Air Force.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I was in basic training for 6 weeks. Like, I have no experience in San Antonio.
Well,
so
I highly recommend you visit. It is a wonderful town. Once travel opens up again, go have the best Tex-Mex you're ever going to have in your life.
Yeah.
I actually really love my hometown. So
that's cool.
Yeah. So what are some other requests that you're getting?
So that would be that's probably been the top one. Now people have asked for like Rorke's Drift and stuff, but my problem is, I mean, there is a States of Siege Alamo game, right?
Is there?
I think there is. I kind of don't think, like, I know that Valiant Defense is different than States of Siege, but they're close enough,
right?
At least like superficially, that I don't know about doing a game on the same topic. So we'll see. Siege of Jodetville. Do you know that?
No.
So there's an awesome Netflix movie by that name.
You know what? We've talked about this, but continue.
Yep. So that would be another one, and that's one I really want to do. That's the Irish guys that were in Africa,
right?
That's what I want to personally do. I haven't had a couple of people have mentioned it, and then Free State of Jones, right? So like So those would be the two I would want to do. People have most asked for Alamo. None of those are World War II. So regardless of which we go with, it would be the first non-World War II Valiant Defense.
Right. Well, as much as I personally love the Alamo, I guess what I would tell you, your unsolicited advice, is that you should do what you want to do, because your creativity and your interest in the research is what makes your games pop. So if you don't want to do that research, then don't. Keep making what you're making, because it always turns out so interesting, and I think it turns out as interesting it does because it's something that captured your attention. I mean, I would never have imagined that there'd be a game coming out about Italian torpedo riders. I didn't even know what that was until By Stealth and Sea. So, I mean, to me that's really cool. So I take it that By Stealth and Sea is not it can't be part of the Valiant Defense series. Are you going to also make a Valiant Offense series?
I know, right? So here's the thing. So a lot of people have asked for, I was talking to Harold about this when we were chatting the other day. One of the funny things about By Stealth and Sea is that when you go into Kickstarter and you look at the community that backed it, like the number one place was the U.S. by far. Mm-hmm. But the number two place was Italy, which is cool because there's probably not many war game Kickstarters where the number two place that backing it are Italy. So that's really cool, and I'm really proud of that, right? Like I think that's awesome. And I was super active. There's an Italian war game Facebook group that I was. They were super into it, and that's really cool. The funny thing about that, though, and I told Harold this story too. Like my next door neighbor when I lived in England, he was into war games, and I didn't know that when I moved next door. Like he actually backed Pavlov's house. Without us having ever met, isn't that bizarre? Like, it's totally crazy. So he actually backed Pavlov's house, and my wife was giving him a piece of mail, and somehow it came out that he was backing it, and I created it, and then we became buddies, and we played Normandy 44, and he was awesome. But he would jokingly tell me when I was talking about By Stealth and Sea, he's like, "Oh, I'm pulling for the Royal Navy," right? Like he's like, and so. That was a really long way of getting back to, like, if I had made By Stealth and Sea, but it was about the British chariot operators who basically emulated the Italians, it would have probably been a lot more popular, right?
Yeah, probably. But it also wouldn't have that same stealth element, which is what attracted me.
Yeah.
And also, while it is true that the Italians were on the wrong side of this war, in my opinion... Definitely my opinion. So, I mean, that doesn't mean that they didn't innovate.
Right, oh yeah.
Or that you can't try to make a game that sees things from a different perspective, especially because of this specific subject matter. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's important for people to know, because there's this stereotype, and I think we may have talked about this before, like the stereotype that's, the Italians were poorly trained and had all this type of stuff during World War II. And it's just, I mean, while that may be true in some cases, it's clearly not true in all cases, right? And so it's cool that this game can fight back against that stereotype. But there's a really, really long way of getting back to your question. I mean, it would be super, super easy to like follow up by Stealth and Sea with the Japanese that did similar, or the British that did similar, right? So yeah. I don't know, if people like it, that would be an awesome thing to follow up on, because I had a ton of fun, researching it and designing it.
Yeah, and you've also got some workable stealth mechanics in place that could be applied to other games. I like trying to sneak around. I mean, I get a huge kick out of the fact that I always get caught, or that, my torpedo fell off, or the ballast went out again.
Yep.
But, I think what I like the most about By Stealth and Sea is how much went wrong and how funny it was, because it was always the worst time.
I know. You'll be in the middle, I would be playing it, and I'm like, man, this is going too easy. Like, I would start to worry, like, oh, this mission's too easy. How am I going to balance this? And then everything falls apart in the next turn, right?
Yeah.
So
I think what I appreciate about it is that a lot of games you kind of want to min-max, and you're playing like to win. One thing I really like about By Stealth and Sea is that you're comparing yourself with history, which doesn't always go well, especially in that first mission. But it's also just sort of an interesting reactive game where you're living the experience of doing it, as opposed to, I mean, you can make smarter and dumber plays for things, and you can work the actions available to you as intelligently as you can. There's a lot of thought that goes into playing, but at the same time, you're also living out a story. And for me, that was a very exciting way to play.
Yeah, I totally agree. And hopefully all of my solitaire war games, the narrative comes out, right? Like, that's the most important. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was definitely what got me going about Pavlov's house. So
yeah.
So you were at home with the kids, and you've been playing games with them. I must ask, since I recommended it to you, how's Animal Crossing going?
Oh, well, so I have not. So I hit with them. Like, I watched them play it first, and I get like. So I was missing out on all of the world of Animal Crossing, right? Like, I had no idea what people are talking about. But now I get that. What's his name? Tom Nook.
Yes.
He's bad. He's like a bad guy, right?
He's a very friendly, polite, helpful bad guy. Oh yeah.
Oh man. I did watch them go through like the beginning, the tutorial or whatever, right? The intro, and it got to where he charges you for everything, like for the very first time. He's that'll be 49,000 bells or whatever. And my daughter's like, what? I mean, it definitely resonated.
She got betrayed for the first time. Oh, that's so good.
And he gives you the phone. He gives you the phone. He's like, here's your phone. It's got all these great apps. Da-da-da. That'll be 49,000 bells or your miles. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is out of control.
She's learning about the real world.
Oh yeah. Yep. They are eating it up. They're loving it. So
that's awesome. I mean, I review games. I like it when a recommendation I make hits home, right?
Yep.
Have you been?
I was thinking about it. They were playing tons of Animal Crossing, and I was playing Slay the Spire, which is just that's my go-to.
How are you enjoying that? I have played it, and I put it down a while back, and I haven't picked it back up. Now that I have this time, I've been thinking about it. So
yeah, I think it's just it. For me, it's the same. Like, I think I've got like 12 hours played or something, and it's just perfect. Hey, I've got an hour by myself. I'm just gonna let's do a run. Let's see how far I can get. And I think it's brilliant because I don't play a lot of video games at all. Right. Very, very seldom. I think it's brilliant because it's basically a board game that can't be a board game.
Right.
Because there's so much, stuff being tracked. Mm-hmm. So it's like, in my opinion, it's basically the perfect game for me, the perfect video game for me.
So I have a question for you. I've only played it some. Is it ultimately satisfying? Does that make sense? Is there an end point, or are you just seeing how well you can do? Because one thing I was wondering about with it is, where is it going? Because I haven't really played far enough in to know more than just, I'm trying to beat this thing. Is there
have you beat a run?
Yeah, I beat a run.
Yeah, I think that's it. Like, I think you beat the run, and then it's like, well, what can I do now? And I don't really care. Like, it tracks points and stuff and unlocks. None of that really means anything to me. So I beat it with 2 different characters. And so I think for me, like, I'd want to beat it with all 4 probably. And then I would feel like, okay, I've gotten the full experience.
Right. That makes sense.
I will say, I mean, to me, as I'm playing it, because I love deck builders so much.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, part of my enjoyment is just seeing the way in which they implement the different deck building concepts.
Yeah, I really like all those modifiers that, you really can't do in a board game.
Yeah.
I mean, Sentinels in the Multiverse, I think, is about the maximum of people's willingness to do your own mods in your head, and most people not even that. So,
Right.
yeah, it was really cool to watch them push that deck building mechanic, but with things that only a video game can do. That I definitely liked. The other thing that I am trying to figure out is, did you just buy a bunch of cards early on, then you weren't really sure of your overall strategy, and then you're like, oh, crap, I'll do better with the next character, or is that just me?
Yeah, it's tough, I was just doing a run, I played yesterday, so I was just doing a run yesterday, and I think that was the first time ever, when you get, like, the 3 cards that you get to choose from, I would actually sometimes just not take any of them. I would just start skipping it. I was like, dude, I'm coming out with this with a 38 card deck. Like, that's not good. You can't possibly. And I even, I was playing with the one she has different stances, right? She has like a calm and I actually started getting rid of every single one of the cards that were one of the stances. I just got rid of. I was like, I'm never going to go into that stance, so I'm just going to get rid of them all.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah.
Do you regret your decision?
Smart or not? I don't know, because you get that big benefit when you come out of a stance. You get like a big one-time energy benefit,
right?
And so I think I'm sacrificing that, but I'm obsessed with blocking, right? Like, I want to block, and every once in a while I'll do like my big hits. So if I know I'm never going to come out of my blocking stance, then I'm just going to optimize for that stance.
I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah. I didn't win the run, though, so maybe it was the wrong call.
But, I do like Slay the Spire in the sense that, so I have tons of board game apps, but I gotta tell you, I never play them.
Yeah,
I will play Slay the Spire, but I really never play board game apps.
Yeah.
It doesn't do it for me. I know that I should maybe try Tabletop Simulator, because especially right now, everyone's like, let's go with Tabletop Simulator, but I really struggle. Have you gotten to where you enjoy TTS because you spend so much time designing on it and it feels more natural for you? Like, should I push on, or should I just...
so let me give you. So keep in mind that like 99.9% of the time I'm on TTS, it's only doing design stuff, right?
Right.
So I'm very seldom going there to play a game that's not a game that I'm designing at the time.
Right.
So when I'm doing design work, I don't even think about it. It's like a means to an end, and it's the only way I can do it.
Right.
But do you know War of Whispers?
No. Oh wait, I've seen that box.
So Shut Up and Sit Down did a review on it recently, which then went instantly out of stock. Right, it's sold out, so you can't get it anywhere.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. So I can't complain because they sold out a print run of Undaunted for me when they did the review, which was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's really good. I mean, people equate it thematically to Game of Thrones, right? And it is, so it's a really good game. Like, it's a really innovative game. It's got a lot of really cool action selection stuff going on. So my buddies, we wanted to play it, and they live in Virginia, so we played it on TTS. It was okay, but learning a game, especially on TTS, is not the easiest thing. So I think if you knew a game really well and you jump on TTS and it's a really good implementation, it's okay.
Right.
Learning a game is challenging, and I think the most challenging bit of that is like trying to recreate your ability to, in person, you can see everything.
Yes.
Right? You can kind of absorb everything, you can track it, and it just makes it so much harder to know anything that anybody else is doing and the board state and what you're doing, in my opinion. It's just more challenging.
That makes sense. So, do you mind if I ask you about that Shut Up and Sit Down interview? Review?
Yeah.
Okay, so what did you think of their criticism that it boiled things down to a battle between the United States and Germany, and that left other countries out?
Yeah. Do you know the podcast So Very Wrong About Games? Have you ever listened to those guys?
I've heard of that podcast and maybe listened to a snippet. I'm terrible. Hey, I have all this time. Maybe I should catch up on my podcast.
So they're a couple of Canadian guys, and they have a podcast. It's really good. They've got a lot of really good critical thoughts on games. So I like that podcast. Yeah. They reviewed Undaunted, and they said the same thing. They were like, hey, we like the game. We wish it was a different theme because everybody does, U.S. versus Germany. Now, So I have a very personal response to that, and then I have
Right.
like a objective view. I'm trying to be objective. So my
Right.
personal response is there's a reason why the game has that theme, and it's because it follows my grandfather's unit.
Yes.
Right. So of course it was always going to be that, because it couldn't be anything but that. Now, if we remove me from that, so here's the unfortunate thing: we're so wrong. Whatever.
So very wrong about games. Yeah.
Yeah, and Shut Up and Sit Down. Neither of them knew that, right? So
Right.
they can't have possibly known that. So if you discount that fact that it was personally based, I mean, they're objectively correct.
Right.
That is the most common thing, right? The counterpoint is we live in a world in which, like, English-speaking Western world people design games that we play for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Many of those people are sensibilities. Like we've been formed from our experiences, which are mostly Western Europe theater, World War II.
Right.
So it kind of makes sense that that's where you're going to draw your experiences from, and that's where most of the games are going to be played. And even if you want to be like cynical about it, like, it's going to be the best selling thing. So even if you didn't care about anything else, it's going to sell the most. So the publisher has a vested interest in making it that. So, I mean, they were wrong from a personal perspective.
Yeah.
It is an objective fact that numbers-wise it is true, and I think it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, the other bit of that is I've also made Pavlov's House, Castle Itter, by Stealth. So it's like, it's unfortunate that they didn't say, this one game was in Western Europe, but every other game is about a much more, niche topic. So
yeah, it's true. And By Stealth and Sea was a risk, as we discussed, and I think it was a risk worth taking. I really enjoyed the game, and I learned a lot from the game. And for me, that's actually a lot of what I'm looking for in historical gaming. So for me, it hits the spot. But yeah, I mean, there's a reason that more people are like, oh yes, I'll play Undaunted Normandy instead of, I want to play a game about Italian torpedo riders.
Yeah, right.
But
yeah. And I mean, well, and here's another question. So let's say Undaunted North Africa came out first.
Right.
Do you think it would be as popular?
That's a great question. I mean, for somebody like me, I would be more drawn to it because I enjoy novelty in my themes, but I also play games all the time. And as a historian by trade, I have a different set of priorities coming towards games than I think the vast majority of people do. I think that doing Undaunted Normandy, marketing-wise, was the obvious choice.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it kind of had to be. Like, I mean, I just don't think, if somebody picks up in the U.S., if they're not a war gamer, right? Let's just, they're a whatever Omni game or whatever. They walk in a store and they pick up North Africa and they flip it around and say, you're playing the long-range desert group against Italians. Like, I don't know what the hell that means. Like, that doesn't mean anything to anybody, right?
Yeah.
But everybody knows U.S. and Germany fighting in Western Europe. So
yeah. So what does that mean for the future of designing games, and particularly historical games, and pushing the boundaries of what themes we think will sell and opening up to more interesting stories and to more diverse stories? Like, how do we go from this is what sells to, this is what sells, and like having a bigger range? Like, do you think that doing something like releasing a follow-up to something like Undaunted Normandy is helping to push so that you can get more interesting games out now that the market trusts your system?
Yeah.
Do you think that you could have done By Stealth and Sea before you did Pavlov's House?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's probably a tougher one. Now, I will say, are you? I don't know if we talked about this. Were you tracking on the whole Marco Wargamer, who now Marco Omni Gamer, his comments about Undaunted and the reply that he got from?
Was this what he was saying about how people don't play war games like they used to, and we need to accept the new way of things, and that something like Undaunted Normandy is just pitched towards the new generation of people who want a war game? Is that about right?
Basically his words, and I'm paraphrasing here, he's basically like, this is the future of wargaming, and people playing, and essentially what he was talking about is like old style hex and counter games, like that's going away, that's dying. Now, I don't agree with, hey, it's great that he likes Undaunted, that's cool, I appreciate the compliment. I don't really agree that old style war games are going away, right? But here's what I'll say. before I answer any of your questions, thankfully we don't have to choose, right?
Right.
Because we live in this kind of a golden age of wargaming, right?
Do.
So people might say like Avalon Hill, where they were selling tens of thousands of copies, was the golden age. And I don't really care to debate that. What I really care about is we can have both. We can have Undaunted Normandy, which sells a lot of copies and all kind of people can play it. And we can have By Stealth and Sea that a couple thousand people will own, and both can exist, right?
Yeah.
Which is awesome. Now, hopefully, something like this would happen. People who never play war games buy Undaunted Normandy. They say, "Oh, this is cool. It's a deck-building war game." Somebody flips through and they read a couple of the scenario historical backgrounds, and it draws their interest. And they say, "Oh, this is cool. I wonder if there's other games about this topic or North Africa, right?" And then they go to other war games, and then finally we have a person playing, super crunchy, crazy something, right? I mean, I'm kind of like that. Like I've got 1754, which is one of the Birth of America games, right? So super light, French and Indian War. But I've also picked up Wilderness War. I'm looking at Wilderness Empire, like crunchier, war games that span the spectrum. And there's got to be other people just like that.
Yeah. I also wonder about things too. So I do believe that if a game is good and you can get it in front of enough people, it will make it. I do think there are some aesthetic aspects to it. So Pax Pamir, for example, second edition. That game is a beautiful example of history-made game, Yeah,
right.
But I don't think that's a topic that most people would have chosen. I think it emerges from the fact that Cole really loves that topic because it's who he is and what he studies. It comes from his heart, and it's beautiful. The production value is really bumped, and I look at a project like that, and I think, how many more kind of wonky historical periods can we make games out of? How do we make this interesting? How do we push this? And I do think that we're entering also a world where we can choose other themes. Like look at Spirit Island, which is about chasing away colonial powers. You have Pax Pamir, which is about, balancing intruders from without. And I wonder, would Pax Pamir Second Edition be doing as well as it should without something like Root?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Like that would be an interesting question for Cole to say, where do you think Pax Pamir's, the second edition Pax Pamir, where its popularity came from? Right? Because they just launched the Kickstarter, right?
It's
like
a reprint.
Reprint of second edition, and it blew up, right? Like it was crazy the first day.
Yeah, I'm actually looking right now.
Yeah, I backed it because I don't have a copy of the first printing.
I backed the coins.
Oh yeah.
I wanted the metal coins. I normally don't bling my games out, but this time it was just time. Yeah. It was a $10,000 goal. It's at $318,491
for that
Pax Pamir reprint, second printing.
Yeah. So look at the weight of the game and the theme of the game.
Yeah.
You would never in a million years say, "Oh, that'll be a $300,000 Kickstarter."
No, and yet it is, and it really warms my heart that this is so, right? Because it gives me a lot of hope for other kind of interesting and thinky game themes to come to the fore. The other thing is, though, that it is, I guess, would you call it a Waro, which is something that we've talked about before? Kind of, it's not probably a war game proper. Yeah. It's a historical game.
I would call it first and foremost a historical game. And if somebody wanted to call it a Waro, I'd say, that's fine. But that's a pretty large, encompassing, genre, I would say.
But it's not the sort of game that goes all the way back to like a hex encounter. What's interesting about Root doing so well is that it's kind of got its roots in the coin system. Its roots, unintentional joke. But I look at something like Pax Pamir, and I'm really fascinated by its ability to do well. That's what I want to see. But I also wonder, are we going to be able to see war games on interesting topics capture people this way? And is it going to be something along the lines of what Marco Wargamer is saying, which is that war games need to change? Or are we going to see people kind of get hooked on the history and start moving back through the rich world of war games that already exists? Because that's what's happening to me. I wasn't a war gamer. I guess I can call myself a war gamer now. I play war games.
Oh yeah.
But for me, this was a journey of, I really like the history behind this game. Let me just kind of keep going. And then before I knew it, it was like a trap. Like, here I am. Yeah. And I just went further down the rabbit hole until I did not want to climb back out of the rabbit hole anymore. And I wonder who else that will happen to, especially with the internet, with these sort of more accessible historical games, with more accessible war games. Like, I'm wondering if this is the new normal, or if it's actually a gateway that'll lead people over into the other side of gaming.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I also think that games like Watergate do the same thing, right? Like, have you played Watergate?
I have not, because it doesn't solo.
What's that?
It doesn't solo, no.
I know, I'm sorry. But I mean, it's a perfect, because it's a CDG, right? It's a historical game. So it is absolutely a gateway drug into all the awesomeness that is, all the war games, CDG type games.
Yeah.
So it is interesting. Like, that would be a great question for Cole. Is like, what do you attribute to the success? I mean, you hit the nail on the head, right? Like, the reason it does well is because it's a fantastic game.
Yeah.
Like, it can't have done that otherwise. But being a fantastic game by itself won't make it popular, right? Like, it has to have something going for it. So.
Yeah, I'm excited about the future of historical gaming. I mean, you're doing really cool stuff that's, I think that actually in some ways, Pavlov's House was a big deal for me as a game, because somebody recommended it to me just as a solo game. I didn't even know it was DVG until I looked it up. And it wasn't somebody who I normally thought would recommend a war game to me. And I thought about that, and I was just like, wow. I mean, in some ways, I think it's a break across the line from, like, war gamer to normal gamer. I don't know if there's such a thing as a normal gamer. First of all, none of us are normal. And also, like, the span of gaming, I mean, you're a gamer if you play Candy Crush, you're a gamer if you play Fire in the Lake,
Yeah, that's right.
But for me, I'm seeing, as somebody who reviews games, right, there's more crossover than I think there has been before. At the same time, a lot of war games that I think are wonderful have fallen off the People's Choice Solo Top 100 this year. So I'm kind of watching trends and really excited about what's going to happen and how the field's going to change, because I think that there will be newer and more interesting to a larger group of people war games coming out, and I'm wondering what it'll do to war games that already exist.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Let me ask you a question. You made me think of this when you talk about the top 100, like the top 100 solo games or whatever. So, you are the solo game community, right? Like, I kind of have like my toe in the solo game community because of the war game designs, but I live in all the worlds. But you embody it. So, if I say, hey, what are the top 10 solo games? And I go to BGG and look it up. Correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't those going to be games that are not solo designed games, but they are games that are super popular that have a solo option?
Sometimes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't think that that's necessarily the defining factor. Let me actually look up the exact People's Choice Top 100.
Okay.
Because I have the spreadsheet sitting on my computer. I'm not nerdy. Okay, so the top 10 this year were Spirit Island, made number 1, over Mage Knight, which broke my heart, to be totally real with you. I'm a Mage Knighter. Terraforming Mars is number 3. ENGN Zend is number 4. That's also in my personal top 10. So is Spirit Island, actually. Scythe was 5, followed by Gloomhaven. Arkham Horror, the card game, which I do think solo is better than it plays too. Robinson Crusoe. And then you have that Lord of the Rings LCG. And then Too Many Bones. So a lot of these are games that do play multiplayer, but I'm not totally convinced that I would prefer them multiplayer. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does, but you're also, you are I don't know how to say this, right? Like
I just come at games differently.
Big time solo player, right?
Yeah.
And so I wonder, it's interesting.
Yeah, so
I feel like what happens is you wind up getting this where you have people that are not really part of the core solitaire world, who are more exposed to multiplayer games and who disproportionately support those over solitaire specific designs.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the people who buy things, does it have a solo mode? I'll think about buying it. Does it have a solo mode? No, I'm not going to buy it. That's a much smaller subset of gamers.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah, and I would actually say that, I mean, I do play multiplayer games. I have a game night. But I would also say that my buying tastes are different because I review games, I want to bring things into the house that I can both play and enjoy and put on my channel. And otherwise I would buy every game under the sun, and that would be a problem. It's already a problem. So, it's a self-limiting thing too. But I really wonder too if people who play these kind of heavier solo games. So the other thing that's really interesting is that the solo games that are at the top of the list are longer, heavier, more difficult. Not always, but there's a lot of them. And I would say that something like Nemo's War.
Yeah.
It's not a big jump from Nemo's War to War.
Yeah. Right. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yep.
That one was, I think, like number 15 this year. So, I mean, I think that players like me, solo players, who already like things like States of Siege games, who already will play something like Mage Knight or Spirit Island, which has a very high complexity level, I don't see it as a big hop over into war games. It's just a matter of pitching the theme that draws somebody in. Yep.
What about the aesthetic? And meaning, like, you could have the exact same game that has sort of a traditional war game aesthetic versus a not, I guess.
I got made fun of on Dice Tower for liking aggressively ugly games a couple weeks ago. But
that you were our hero on that episode, right?
But for me, like, first of all, I don't think war games are ugly. I think they're efficient.
Yeah.
But I don't have a problem with that. I think, to me, as somebody who likes historical documents, and I like things that look a little bit old and look a little bit, I don't know, like a serious map or something. I really dig that look, generally. So, I mean, to me, they aren't ugly at all. I do think that something like Pax Premier 2nd Edition that has that gorgeous production value, it's definitely punching through. I think that having prettier components and having things look a little bit more slick does sell more games. Like, look at how much fun people make of Holland Spiel's parts. I talked about this with Harold yesterday. Like, to me, it's efficient and it doesn't bother me at all. The game works and I'm really in it for the game. But do I think that if there was like a cloth map and like these more deluxe chits and linen finish cards and would it do better? Yeah, probably. But I think that people like to buy the bling. But what interests me about that is that, I mean, okay, so you spend probably more time designing games than playing them for the most part, I would guess, because you have a huge schedule.
Yeah.
So when you buy a deluxe game, do you feel that you get the full value out of that game? Like, are you getting enough plays per dollar, I guess?
I try to never think about, like, am I going to play it?
Yeah.
Oh, so I've tried to buy less, but I don't worry about whether I'm going to play a game a lot when I buy it.
Right.
I almost always buy, my collection kind of sucks because it's not very versatile, right? And what I mean by that is, like, I don't have a really good assortment of games for different audiences. I have a lot of games for my specific family, right? So that I can play with my kids, and then I have a ton of historical games. And I bought those historical games mostly because of whatever their topic is.
Right.
So you and I talked about this, right? Like, I have Days of Ire and Knights of Fire. Will I play them a lot? No. Probably not. Do I really want them? Yes. Because how many games do I have on those topics?
Yeah.
And so my calculus for board game plays to dollar, it's not something I think a lot about.
That's interesting. I think also because I review, so I have games coming in all the time, you have to be worth my shelf space to stay in my home. And it's just the way that it is. If I look at a game and I'm like, I don't really want to play it, it goes in the trade pile. Yeah. Like, I look at Mage Knight and feel pangs of longing when I'm too busy to play it. it stays.
Yeah.
But, I actually, because they were review copies, I just gave them on, like, Days of Ire and Nights of Fire, because I knew that I wasn't going to keep playing them. So they left the house. And they have to. They just have to. I can't keep them. Yeah. And so, I have to be really harsh about my cuts. Yeah. Honestly, if I gave it a 7 or less on Dice Tower, it's probably gone, unless it was like the Oniverse games I keep the full set.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Because I feel like as a solo gamer, like, you want the full set of Oniverse games. But for the most part, I have to kick things out the door quick.
Yeah.
So would you say that your home is not overwhelmed by games?
I don't have like a specific number, but I have my game shelf, and if it doesn't fit on there, I don't keep it. And so that's about 100 to 125 games.
That makes sense.
I will, if I start struggling to get them on the shelf, I'll make sure I get rid of them at the next convention, or I usually just give them away. So I had a buddy of mine visiting who's a big war gamer, and so I took a whole box of games and just gave them to him.
Yeah. The other thing I actually do is I have a local guy who has a game store, and so I just trade stuff to him for store credit at a pretty reduced rate, because I don't really feel like I should profit off of review copies, but it's an easy place to get rid of them.
Yeah. Well, and plus if you're getting store credit and you wind up reviewing the game that you're getting from the store, you're not even really profiting, right?
Yeah, I mean, I try to get rid of things as efficiently as possible while being ethical. Yeah. I'm not gonna take some deluxe thing that I know is worth $150 and try to sell it for $150. It just doesn't seem right.
Yeah, I guess. Though at the same time, you're also spending way more time doing the review than, like, you're like me. You ever want to break down what you're doing into, like, how much you're getting paid per hour?
No. Nope. Let's not think about that. Nope.
Designing games.
I'll be really glad with all my cents per hour. So, you have any big plans for today other than preparing to do ArcGIS and hang out with the kids?
No, that's probably it. I did get in the mail. I just received yesterday a book that is written by a Ford observer that was at the Battle of Mortain on the hill that was surrounded. So I have a new juicy book to break into. It's an artillery Ford observer.
That sounds fantastic.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to let you go do that, because the more you research, the faster my games come out. But thank you so much for coming on. Anybody who's watching, feel free to leave us a comment below. We hope that you are all safe and healthy and hopefully not too stir crazy. And happy gaming.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I am here with Brady Sadler.
Hey, how's it going?
It is going alright. How are you doing over there?
Good. Hanging in there.
So we are here because everyone is just kind of hanging in there right now, and we are looking for ways to entertain ourselves, each other, and of course especially y'all. So, Brady, do you want to tell people what you're famous for, even though they should already know before we get into the main topic of our conversation?
Let's see. Well, I guess the most famous thing is I designed a game called Warhammer Quest: The Adventure Card Game. I think that's probably like most of what I was known for originally in board game design, but I've done other games since then. I've been doing all kinds of expansions for FFG when I was there, and then now with Blacklist Games, I'm doing a lot of core designs. And before that, I was a writer, but my one novel wasn't exactly famous. So,
so speaking of the fact that you're a writer and someone who's a fan of novels, I'll just get to the point. We are today going to list our top 10 books to read during this time when no one has anywhere to go, because Brady and I both read a lot of books. Brady, you can tell us about your criteria. Just so everybody knows, I just picked 10 things I thought were fun to read. Some of them had multiple volumes, so you could just entertain yourself some with something other than games for the next couple weeks. So Brady, did you put together mostly fantasy stuff, or is it all over the place?
I mean, most of my reading is either fantasy, horror, or like comics, like the graphic novels and stuff. But those are categorized also, so like just superheroes, I guess. But
Awesome. So since let's just get down to it. What is your number 10 recommendation for things that people should be reading during?
I made a physical stack over here as a reminder because I have shelves and shelves of books, but I didn't rank them, like tier them out. I have kind of a rough ranking, but I'll go with my number 10. Let's see. I'll grab. So I didn't grow up being a huge Stephen King fan, but I was kind of a latecomer to a lot of his stuff. But I think one of the ones that really caught me, the first one I read of his was It, which I loved a lot. But this is Salem's Lot. This one's really cool. This was highly recommended when I first started reading Stephen King stuff, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, they're doing a new series for this, a new TV series, right? Pretty easy to. It's not like gonna take you too long to finish this thing. It's not too fat of a book, but I'd recommend it. It's pretty good. It's a good vampire story.
Fantastic. All right. So my number 10. So I'll give you the first book in a series. So a lot of my students like it. It's one of those kind of young adult literature series that has a lot of fantasy elements, but honestly, I was a little shocked that some of my high schools are reading it because it also has a lot of sexy time in there. So it is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, Maas. And that's the first book in a series of several books that are about all of these like fantastical human fairy relationships in a kind of fairy tale world that's also pretty racy. And frankly, if you're sitting at home with nothing else to do, this is high entertainment in my opinion. So
yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah, she also wrote a fantasy series called Throne of Glass.
Okay.
That I think a lot of people really like, but I actually like the Court of... It's always a court of something and something else. I like the Court series better. And, it's usually the first one in the series should be pretty cheap on an e-reader. I'm bad. I download most of my books these days.
I wish I could. Like, I the convenience of having my iPad to read on, it'd be great for. I'd probably read a lot more, but something about like, I think I just got accustomed to holding physical books. When I was in college, I read probably a new novel every week when I was starting to do writing. So I don't know. I got drawn to that whole physical nature, but it sucks because I don't always want to carry books around or whatever. So.
Right. Do you write on your books?
I do. The weird thing about my writing process is usually I'll have one of those like moleskin notebooks. I always carry one of those around, whatever size. Yeah. And if I'm like brainstorming stuff for either a game or like story stuff, I do a lot better if I just constantly write stream of conscious down on paper. I feel like I develop ideas better that way because otherwise they just kind of stagnate inside and I don't actually act on them. But everything I'm writing by hand, I never actually use. It's just to get out of my head, and then I'll actually do the official stuff, typing it out.
So do you keep those books and look back at them later, or are they purely an in the moment thing and then you just dump them when you're done?
I think I keep them mostly because I love little books. Like I have this weird fetish for just small little books. I don't know what it is. But
no, I have a huge notebook collection too, actually. So you're not alone.
So yeah, I'll flip through them sometimes just to like impress myself with how much I can dump out of my head, But I don't really actually read them. So even when I'm writing them, I don't write very legibly. I kind of just scribble. So like even if I want to go back over my notes, I probably won't catch everything that I've written. Right. It's more just a practice of. It's like a thought process. Yeah. And it's kind of it might even be a detriment to my productivity because I spend more time, thinking that way than I do just acting on final stuff. So it's not probably the most efficient way to do things. But
I disagree. I think it's good to incubate because then when it's time to get down to business, you've already pretty much decided how it's going to go. So that part goes better. At least that's how it was for me when I was writing my dissertation. That's how it is for me when I'm doing like lesson plans. If I have like a long kind of incubation process where I kind of let everything pile up and I'm like got little thoughts everywhere, it will form itself and then it's a lot easier to execute. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
All right. So what is your?
Yeah, I think it's like exercising your brain because it just makes it so you get the thoughts out and then you focus on the ones that are important. So.
Yeah. So what is your number 9? Out of curiosity.
Number 9.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know. This one's it's kind of a rough recommendation for me, but it's something that I think has enough of a fan base that supports it. And I remember I didn't get all the way into the series,
Can you move it over so we can see? Just put it right in front of you. Just a second. Yes.
Can you see it there? Yeah.
I see it.
So this is Robert Jordan series.
Okay, yes.
Wheel Time.
Yes.
So I only got like to book 4, I think. But I've read this book like probably 10 times. Like I'll always go back and read this one because I'm like, oh, so I'm gonna start the series again, and I never finish it. Someday I'll probably go back and finish it because people have been warning me off of it for so long. Like, oh, don't read that series. But every time I read this book, I'm like, I want to finish this series because this book is good. So I always recommend that one because it's just a good fantasy novel.
Hey, maybe we'll do it together because I actually have books 1 through 3 on my shelf right now because I figured it was a good time. Also, Barnes & Noble has curbside book pickup now.
Oh, nice.
I mean, that's amazing.
That's tempting.
I mean, I love my e-reader. I actually have the e-ink one. I like a book that can morph into any other book. Like, to me, that is possibly the most magical thing ever. But I also do like paper books, so I have those on paper. That's awesome.
Yeah, I had the box for the first, I think 3 or 4, and now I just have this one. I'm not sure where the rest of them went, but I remember liking it. It just the 4 was kind of tough. It was kind of a slow going process in book 4, but I've heard it picked up after that.
All right, I'm ready to give this a shot, I think. All right, so my number 9 is super easy reading because it's nostalgia reading, and I also think that people who have kids at home or getting to where they can appreciate books might also like it, and that would be the Redwall series by Brian Jacques. Jacques? I don't even know how they pronounce it.
I think it's Jacques. Yeah, I never heard it said out loud really, but yeah.
But I mean, I've been reading his name since I was in elementary school. Like I've read those books long ago, and I love them. They are these fun. Like if you like Mice and Mystics, if you like Watership Down, if you think that Everdell has cool art and you want to read about little animals and you haven't yet, Redwall is the place to go. Honestly, if you read too far into the series, you start to realize that all the books feel a little samey, but those early ones are really good. And, you know, they're simple enough for kids to enjoy because I remember reading them as a kid, but it's just a very charming and sweet world, and it's good time. So if you want like nice escapist reading about cute animals, I feel like Redwall is the way to go.
Yeah, I've been meaning to read that one because it's always highly recommended, and I had the what was the Mouse Guard was like the graphic novel.
Yeah,
I think it was kind of inspired by that. So I've always seen those two, and I've kind of wanted to check those out because I had the Mouse Guard RPG book, but never actually read the books. So
I'm the opposite. I saw someone with the RPG, so I went and read the books, and they were really charming.
Oh yeah.
They just had the one problem that all graphic novels have, which is they go by too fast.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like they cost more than regular books, and I just.
yeah.
So is your number 8 a graphic novel?
Novels. Yeah, that's my my next recommendation is something I got for Christmas, which I wanted to read for so long. I just never got around to it. And I got a really awesome deluxe edition of it, The Watchmen.
Ooh, that's so good.
It's not as big as you would hope for like, this kind of reading, like to keep you occupied, because I churned through this probably in a few days.
Yeah.
But man, it is I regret putting it off for so long because it is a really good read, and it'll keep you turning pages for the whole day essentially.
Yeah, that is some quality graphic novel reading. Okay, I have a question. Do you feel weird calling graphic novels that instead of comic books? Like it sounds like you're trying to make them. I mean, I feel like I'm cool
I can
I
see lots of arguments. I can see lots of arguments about that because they're. It's almost like it might be like a pretentious term that came up because of that, but I would call them whatever people understand, because whatever's like the most colloquial term. Personally, I wouldn't care if I called that a comic. It's still register the same way in my head because I read comics and graphic novels and novels. So.
Yeah, I just always wonder about it because I've started using that term more, but I used to just call them all comics. I think it typically. I guess Watchmen's a graphic novel because it's like a self-contained book.
Yeah, it wasn't
story
issued.
arc.
I mean, I think they released it issue-wise, but it was meant to be a collection, so it was like a set story.
But before I get to my number 8, I guess my bonus recommendation for that would be, I think my favorite comic series ever is Sandman.
Oh, yeah. I've only read some of that, but it was pretty good. Yeah.
It's so good. It's worth every moment you put into it. Really, really good.
Yeah.
All right, so my number 8, it is something that might be a little bit off the beaten path, but I recommend it. It's part of a series. It's called the Clocktar War. And the first one in that series is called Clockwork Boys, and it's by T. Kingfisher. She writes novels under her actual name for, I think, a younger audience, but the pen name that she uses for these books is T. Kingfisher. And her books are just delightful. She does a lot of rewriting of fairy tales and stuff, but I really like Clockwork Boys, because it has like a troubled paladin who's possessed by a demon, and like a very practical female heroine with, you know, an assassin ex-boyfriend, and like it's just a lot of fun. Like she just really puts together this very fun cast of characters that you enjoy a lot, and the story is really interesting as well. It's about these monstrous creatures that are coming from a neighboring city and laying waste to the countryside, and they go and try to figure out, you know, what is happening and why, and the solutions behind that are also actually very interesting. So it's just a really neat little fantasy series. It's a quick read, and they're pretty cheap to download, which, I mean, that's a great trifecta for me.
Yeah. That'll do it.
What's your next one? Lay it on me.
So we are on 7, right? This is number 7.
Yeah.
So I don't have the show and tell here, but one I've been reading with my daughter, and this one's kind of, it's probably only good if you have kids, because I can't imagine somebody getting, you know, too deep into this series if you don't have kids to enjoy it with. But it's called The Last Kids on Earth.
Okay.
And I believe the author's name is Max Ballier, I think, Ballier or whatever.
Ballier, yeah.
But
okay.
it's a pretty popular IP, so it'll be easy to find it because you'll see it everywhere. It has a Netflix show, so they have like 5 or 6 books. But the first Netflix series was like a movie, like an hour and a half long movie, but it was just the first book. But they're doing additional like seasons for the other books, so it's like episodes.
Oh, sweet.
But it's, you know, pretty much just like a kid-friendly, gross-out fest, you know, zombie apocalypse style story with like monsters and stuff like that. It's really interesting because I always try to like toy with the idea of creating a young adult IP that's kind of that whole zombie apocalypse thing. It's probably one of my favorite favorite themes ever is like the zombie apocalypse stuff. Like my favorite video game ever is Resident Evil. I love that series because of that. It really got me into it. So I'm always trying to toy with the idea of doing that in more of a playful manner, sort of like less severe and morbid, which is kind of weird because you have walking corpses, you know. So, but this guy does an interesting way where like these kids are, you know, they're the last. It's kind of a horrible scenario, like all these kids are all alone, but it's done in a playful way where they're like partying and like having fun, like this escaping zombies and stuff, and it's just got an interesting tone. So I would recommend it if you have kids.
That's interesting. Yeah, I feel like a lot of kids literature, though, I think kids like to read stories where they're kids alone. You know, think about like the Boxcar Kids or something when we were younger, or I don't know, any kids series always involves kids doing stuff apart from adults and having some sort of agency. So I mean, this sounds like the zombie version of that. That's cool.
Yep.
I like it. All right, so my number 7 is also, it's a trilogy. The first one is called The Ship of Rome, and I think the whole series is Masters of the Sea. It's by John Stack, and it's just this like fun adventure series that's set during the First Punic War between Rome and Carthage, and it's just this like dude who's really good at piloting a ship, and he comes up with, you know, innovations for sailing that are historical. So if you don't know about these things, I won't give them away. But you know, it's just a rollicking adventure with like ship battles and, you know, guys posturing and like trying to get the most glory in war, and like it's like it's just a good sea tale with battles, and who doesn't enjoy that, right? And I really like that sort of thing. And you'll accidentally learn a lot of history along the way, which I think is fun, because if you can learn something and it's painless, oh yeah.
Nice.
But
yeah, I've been always meaning to get more into like some of the more historical inspired stuff. I had a minor in history, so I've always had like this, you know, interest in history. I feel like I never act on it enough. I never like research it more than I beyond what school, you know, makes you do. But I'm always drawn to it. So, and I hear you talk about historical stuff a lot when you're talking about like war games and everything. So I'm always interested in diving more into that side of things.
Yeah, well, if you ever want more lame recommendations, I got lots. No, I love historical fiction. I also like fantasy. Awesome. One of the reasons I invited you on here is I was like, I'll get some good fantasy recommendations. So.
Yeah, the problem with mine is like I always feel like my recommendations are almost too cliche, because it's like a lot of the series I got into became like big sensations, and I was like, and I feel like I don't talk about it as much anymore because I don't want to be just like another voice in there saying like, oh, this is so great. But I mean, you know, I try to do some B-list things as well. So.
Hey, you know what? I'm a big believer that there should be no shame about what you read or what you like to read. I don't know. I mean, I read a complete range. So any one day I could be reading something super, I don't know, I guess like dry and historical, or I could be reading some absolute romance novel like, woo, that was like free on Kindle, you know. So like I read the whole range, and I think everybody should. You know, you got to have variety.
Yeah.
It's good. You should just like what you like.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. What number are we on now? Is this 5 or is this
6?
Number 6?
Yeah,
okay.
I gotta check too.
I think we're on. Oh yeah, my number 6. I'd have visual reminders every time I have to write my list down. But this is another big series, one that I haven't finished. But luckily, a lot of the books stand on their own.
Yeah.
They're like their own stories. They kind of just link together through the world building. But it's Stephen Erickson, Gardens of the Moon,
Ooh.
and this is the book series is called the Malazan Book of the Fallen, and this guy he based this on his D&D campaign.
Okay.
But it's insane. Each book grows like double the size of the last one, so they're just like, this is the smallest one in the series, and it's still pretty beefy. The funny thing about this book though is when I read it the first time, like I finished it out of spite, but I hated it. I was like, I do not like this book. I feel like I need to get through it because I started it, you know. But then after I finished it, I was like, I'll read the next one to see if it's better. And I got kind of stuck on that one, and I was like, I feel like I'm lost here. So I went back and read this again. And the second time I read through, I don't know what it was, but it was like a complete 180. I was like, this is amazing. This is brilliant. This guy is, you know, he is a wordsmith. So every time I've read it like probably 2 or 3 times since then, and every time I liked it more. I still want to get through the series. I've only read into book 3 so far because they're a lot to churn through, but I would recommend at least that first book, and some people might have to read it a couple times to get in it, like me, I don't know, but it is a pretty popular series, so maybe I was a fluke the way I read it, but it did pick up after the second time I read it.
So do you feel obligated to finish books that you don't like?
Sometimes. Like I was actually gonna bring this discussion based off of this book because I'm working through The Stand by Stephen King. Okay. And it's like the complete uncut edition where he added a bunch of stuff, so it's huge. And like I got through like about 2/3 of it, but toward the tail end, I'm kind of reading it out of spite, where it's like I don't think I want to finish this, but I feel like I need to finish it. And I've set it aside now. I haven't touched it for a few days, but I think I need to go back and finish the last few chapters. But at the same time, like, why? Like, there's other things I want to read, so like, why bother? You know. So
maybe this is a controversial opinion, but I sort of feel like if you're not into it, just put it away for a while, at least. You don't have to finish it. Your life is short.
Yeah, that's what bookmarks are for too. Because like I'll set aside a book sometimes, and I'll put my bookmark in there. And part of me, my completionist side, doesn't want to come back in and read the rest if I forgot what happened before. Right. But I did that with actually The Stand. I set that aside for a while when I was halfway through, picked it back up, finished the next third of it, and now I set it aside again. Maybe I'll finish it someday. I don't know, but it's not hitting me right now. It's just, even though it's topical, like it's about a big virus that makes everybody. It's like an apocalyptic scenario, but it's not really pulling me, and I think it's because I've read so many other good Stephen King books. This one's kind of like, it's okay.
Yeah, but I think with anything, games too, if you're not feeling it, you're not feeling it. Like, it's okay.
Yeah. Don't force yourself to like something. There's plenty of other options.
Yeah, there's so many other options with games, but especially with books. All right, so my number 6 actually is kind of a weird choice. It's called the Corfu trilogy. The very first one is called My Family and Other Animals. And it is by Gerald Durrell. It's just a memoir of this guy whose family moves to Corfu, and he ends up being a budding naturalist. But everybody that he meets and everybody that lives with him is a total weirdo. And he manages to write about his family and their friends and all the people they meet in just these really quirky and hilarious ways. And there's something so charming about it also because he's like a child growing up on Corfu, and he keeps bringing animals in the house that nobody else is interested in, like a scorpion or like all these different kinds of birds or just things that he finds out there. And his mother's horrified yet begrudgingly supportive. And just if you want to read something that's like a little edgy, but like mostly just like a fun like memoir of growing up in a weird place with your weird family, it's a really delightful trilogy of books. And especially because we're all kind of stuck where we're at, reading an escapist thing about going to a sunny, nice island. I mean, I might go back into that just for the change of scenery.
Yeah, that's why I play Animal Crossing, man.
Oh man, I'm loving that game way more than I should. I made my own torrential island last night.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so like if you go to an island that spawns tarantulas, right? If you cut down all the trees and get rid of places for other bugs to spawn and just chase the beetles and the wharf roaches away, you'll get a higher spawn rate of tarantulas. So I filled my entire inventory with tarantulas, and then I went back and sold them all.
That's like 9,000 bells a pop, right?
Sadly, it said 6,400, but I sold them in the box. Maybe I should have waited and gone in. I don't know. I'm still learning like exactly how much things are worth. But it was pretty funny. I actually really enjoyed just like the showdown. Have you caught a lot of tarantulas?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I've been knocked out by more, but I've caught quite a few too.
But like, try to catch a bunch more. Like that little showdown that you have, where they just unnaturally know that you're headed that way, and just. And you have to wait. Yeah. It's so funny.
And if you creep along with your A held, you're like holding your net up, like, okay, I'm close enough now. I can't move anymore.
I like all the little dramas in Animal Crossing. It's a delightful game.
It is. I did not expect. I bought it on a whim to keep my daughter occupied.
Yeah.
And I bought it on my Switch instead of hers. And when I played it, I'm like, I'll buy you your own copy. Leave me alone. I'm playing this.
Yeah, my boyfriend and I had to each get a copy because. I tried to infect David Thompson, but he only got it for his kids.
Yeah, Adam hasn't got it. He watched his wife has it and his daughter has it, and he watches and played. He's like, eh. But I'm like, don't play it because you'll probably get obsessed with it. So don't worry about it.
Sometimes you're just better off reading a book.
Yeah.
So what's your next book? What is your number 5? We're number 5.
So number 5, this is a. This is a cautious recommendation because I will admit the books are not fantastic. The books are not like, they're not art form. But like I said before, one of my favorite games ever is Resident Evil. And there was this author, S.D. Perry. She's a great author, but she had some constraints with this IP because the Resident Evil IP is kind of a mess. Yeah. And the way the video game, licensing works, that when they change story elements in a game they're developing, they won't always tell the authors. So there's a big series of Resident Evil books. I think it's like 6 total, and it encompasses like the first game, the second game, and then like a few side stories that weren't actual games. But yeah, S.C. Perry. The first one is just called Resident Evil: The Umbrella Conspiracy. The Umbrella Conspiracy. Sorry,
okay,
Umbrella. The Umbrella Conspiracy. But it just kind of tells the tale of the first game. And the reason it's recommended is because they're very easy reads. They're very kind of like popcorn novels, They're not too long. You can churn through them, but they're good page turners. They're like, that's what they do well, I think. They have good suspense and everything. But if you like the IP, that's only going to help because the Resident Evil franchise has all those characters that will come in the books and go into more detail on it and everything. So while I have personal problems with the books because I'm so drawn to and attached to the IP, I still appreciate them for what they are. So
right.
So that's why I think American Nation, and that's why they're higher on the list, is because I'm just so, it's the same way with the Resident Evil 2 board game. Like, I can openly admit people who might not like the IP will probably hate that board game, but because I love it so much, it's like one of my favorite board games ever because it captures that video game so well.
That's awesome. Super awesome. I'm always really interested to watch, like, board game, video game. Like, I tried to read one of the Mage Knight novels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's probably a mess because that IP is kind of just a chaotic, hodgepodge of stuff. So I'd imagine the novel might be kind of rough to get through.
Yeah. I'm always really... I like it when you can have a good book, a good game, and a good... Like, I think Witcher is exceptional, right? Because it had good novels, good video games,
it spawned novels, so.
And a board game.
I think as long as it starts from the novel, it has a better chance of spawning a more rich IP all around.
Yeah, I actually might get back into Witcher while I'm just hanging out at home. That's a good thought too. I didn't even put that on the list. So, so my number 5. So it's a trilogy, but only 2 of the 3 books exist. The third one is slated to be published in June, so it's not that long of a wait, which is why I went for it because I've waited on a lot of third books and trilogies or the next book in a series, and it's broken my heart. But this one I think is going to come out. So it's the Davabad trilogy by S.A. Chakraborty. It's Chakraborty. Pretty sure. Yeah, that's what I wrote down. So, so it is a really fascinating series. I won't give too much of it away. It gets very dramatic and political, and people, people have these like alliances that form and then break, and interesting friendships form out of troubled situations. It's so good. But it's basically about this girl who's a street urchin in Cairo who is maybe a little bit more than human, and it turns out that that is in fact the case, and she ends up, you know, going to live in a non-human world and having to deal with politics and her birthright and craziness. But it's got this really great, you know, Middle Eastern feel to it, which I really enjoy. It makes me miss working in Egypt a lot. And so I like to read books that are set in Middle Eastern or kind of fantasy Middle Eastern environments, because it really, you know, it hits all the right notes for me, and like in terms of where I've traveled in my life that made me happy. And, you know, also interesting stories that don't read quite the same as your typical knight and mage and dragon and stuff, which I do like, but I need a little bit of a break sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. What was the name of the series again, of the trilogy?
It's the Daevabad, Daevabad trilogy.
Okay.
And it's got the first one's called City of Brass.
Okay. Cool. Sounds awesome.
It's super good. I really like it.
And that was your number. That was number 5, or was that 4?
Yeah, we're going
That's
into 4.
5. Okay.
Woo.
So now we're on 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we could probably just talk about books all day, really, but...
Yeah. So this one was a surprise to me, because this actually got me. I mentioned how I got into Stephen King a little late.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, what got me back into checking out his works is I randomly picked this up, this 11/22/63 novel he did.
Oh, is that good? I looked at it and I just never picked it up.
Oh my god, I don't know why. Honestly, I don't know why I picked it up. I think I might have picked it up because I was just desperate for something to read, and I saw like, oh, there's a Hulu show coming out. I'll check this out.
All right.
By the way, the Hulu show is pretty dang good. It's James Franco. It's a pretty good show.
Okay.
Obviously, I was slightly let down because the book is so much better, but that's always the case, you know.
Yeah.
But holy cow, yeah, this book, like, it's weird because it's not like I won't give away too much of, like, you know, the actual story, but as far as like genre goes, it's not much of a real horror story, or like it has some thriller elements, obviously.
All right.
But it's mostly just this really like charming like time story, like our time traveling story about just somebody living in a different time period and trying to adapt and growing attached to certain things and like not wanting to go home. So like it just like the big chunk of the book, like probably I'd say a good 2/3 of the book is mostly just day-to-day life for this person in this different time period when they go back to the 60s. And yeah, it's just I highly recommend it. It's really cool. It's hard to explain like without spoiling much of the story aspects, but the overall concept is just a teacher somehow ends up going back in time, and he decides I better stop Kennedy from being assassinated. That's like his goal, essentially. That's like that's the impetus of the story. But beyond that, it's just like this really charming, dramatic, you know, life he has in the 60s. It's really interesting.
Cool. That's really cool. Okay, I might have to try that.
Yeah, it's very hard to describe and nail down like what really captures it for me, but I think it's more just like the relationships he builds and just very personable things. And I think it's also because he's writing through a time period he's very familiar with, you know, so there's like lots of cues he can go off of and everything. So it just has that, you know, you watch Back to the Future and, you know, I'm guessing you're a child of the 80s also like me, so born in the 80s. And
yeah, I was born in 86.
Yeah, okay, so close, yeah. So that's it's roughly, my wife was born 85, so I'm 83, so I'm a little more probably, I'll watch Back to the Future, and even though I wasn't fully aware of like the 80s, it still feels like that's my home, you know, just because it does such a good job of building that world in that time. So
interesting. Yeah, I think I actually feel like I'm more of a 90s kid.
Yeah.
Like in terms of pop culture I identified with and music I liked and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm a little of both because like I don't remember much of the 80s. I was still pretty young. Yeah. I know a lot of the media I consumed was still like from the 80s, so
yeah, I actually grew up liking music that was older because, you know, my dad really influenced me a lot musically. And also, actually, you know, I really appreciate my father. He thought to do things like, he was like, oh, it's time for you to see Star Wars. So he went and rented, you know, Star Wars. But he's also the person who showed me the Full Metal Jacket and A Clockwork Orange. So I have the best dad, you know. All right, so we're at number 4. My number 4 is another, like, when you're stuck in the house and you want to think about free range travel and you just need to read something about not here. It's one of my favorite books. I occasionally go back and read it every few years. You might think that it's dry, depending on the sort of person you are, but it's called Travels with a Tangerine. It's by Tim McIntosh Smith, and he's an Arabist from the UK who now lives in Yemen. And the tangerine that he's traveling with is Ibn Battuta, who is like a medieval, Arab traveler who went on these incredible journeys around the world and saw so many things and met so many cool people and recorded everything. So it's, a modern person who's steeped in that literature, traveling around to those sites and going to, places that are important in terms of Battuta enthusiasm. But also talking about visiting, the sites of Muslim saints' graves and all these different things. And it's just, he's a funny guy because, he's clearly very scholarly and he has all these very interesting facts. But he also talks about taking a dump off the end of a boat during part of his journey. And it's a really fun, it's enlightening, but it's also just really fun to think about going to all these places and following that journey. And especially now when we can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
I can go somewhere in a book. So
Yeah. Awesome.
All right, so number 3, we're getting to the high level stuff here.
So my number 3, again, this might be kind of a cautious recommendation because I love it. I think that also it's already pretty well, recommended, I'm sure. But The Walking Dead graphic novels,
those are good.
I ended up plowing through those on that's actually one thing I did read on my iPad. I didn't want to carry those huge omnibuses around, so I just bought them on my iPad and I would just flip through them so quick. But I think I chewed through the entire series as I was painting the Mantic Games miniatures line of The Walking Dead based on the comics. So I was playing the game solo, painting the miniatures, and reading the books as I went through the narratives. So that was a fun experience because it was just, I was pretty much all just absorbed in The Walking Dead for the last 3 or 4 months or something leading up to now. So that's one I'd heavily recommend just because it's so engaging and it lets you just get lost in the story for long periods of time, which some people might need right now. So that's probably the biggest recommendation I have for it because I could not put it down. I'd read it at night in my bed on my iPad and I just couldn't stop reading. I was like, it's 1:30, I better stop. One more page.
Does that happen to you a lot? Do you like to stay up and read?
It's weird because it's mostly, there are some books that'll do that, but like Walking Dead, when it's so quick to read, where the dialogue's pretty sparse, so you just keep flipping through. I think it's if you're turning pages quicker, then I feel like I can keep going. That's what makes me not want to put it down. But some of the heavier books I read, I'll get to a stopping point. All right, I'm gonna stop there because it's easy to stop, and you don't have to think too much. So. But it all depends on the book, really. There's some books that, I'll just keep going all night on.
I gotta tell you, so when Patrick Rothfuss's Doors of Stone finally comes out, fingers crossed, I'm probably just gonna take a day off work.
Yeah.
I'm really sick.
I did. Yeah, I did that with. I was still in school, but I did that with Feast for Crows when it came out. George R. R. Martin's, when that came out, I was like, oh, well, sorry, I can't make it into work the next couple days.
My parents.
And I finished that thing in I think 2.5 days. I finished that whole book. So.
I feel like this is why it turned out the way I did, for better or for worse. So when I was younger, my mom caught me trying to read. I think it was the Bobbsey Twins or something, by the light coming in from the hallway. My parents had put me to bed, and I didn't want to go to bed. I wanted to read. Instead of telling me to stop and go to bed, my mom got me a bedside table lamp. And she just brought me the lamp, and she put it there, and she's like, well, you're reading, so okay. And that was always the thing, I wasn't allowed to watch bad things when I was younger, but if I could read it and understand it, my parents were like, well, I guess you're old enough for it. So I got to read whatever I wanted. And
nice.
It was awesome. Nobody ever told me no on a book.
That's cool.
So, that's where all the excitement was when I was younger. All right, so my number 3 is actually a book about confinement. So I have these free-ranging travel books on my list. But also, I read a really great book about a year ago, and it is called A Gentleman in Moscow. And I don't know how to pronounce his name, but it's Amr Towles, Towles. I don't actually know how to pronounce his name at all, but the book is fabulous, and it is about this Russian aristocrat who, when the aristocracy falls and a communist regime takes over, he's written some poetry or something that upset people, and he is sentenced to live in a hotel for the rest of his life, and if he leaves, he will be shot.
Wow.
And so it's about this guy who used to have everything, is still accustomed to a somewhat luxurious lifestyle, but it's humbling for him, and he has to figure out how to deal with his isolation and his entrapment in this place. He makes friends with this like rambunctious little girl who turns out to mean a lot more to him over time in a really sweet way. And you know, it's got like a really neat developing story about a person changing in a place that does change, but maybe not as much as the outside. And it's really just good writing, good storytelling. It's a good book, and I really enjoyed the time that I spent with it. So I figured I would recommend it.
What was it called again? What was the name of it?
It's called A Gentleman in Moscow.
A Gentleman in Moscow.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of familiar. Maybe if someone's recommended that before, but yeah, I'll have to look into that one. That sounds cool.
Yeah, if they did recommend it, they were right.
So we're at number 2 now, right?
Number 2.
This one, this is my weightlifting regimen. Number 2.
Oh, man.
Involves all 3 of these. I don't know if you can read that okay.
So
this
Batman
is the
Nightfall.
Oh, sorry, it's upside down. Yeah, this is the Batman Nightfall series, which consists of 3 beefy volumes, but I don't recommend a ton of traditional comics when it comes to, you know, reading lists, but people who know me know that I have a weird obsession with the not just Robin, but Tim Drake Robin, the second Robin.
Yeah.
The third Robin, not the second Robin, the third Robin. But the Nightfall is kind of where he really shines, because Batman's taken out of commission, and there's a replacement Batman, Bruce Wayne's out of commission. There's a replacement Batman, and that's what that story's all about. And there's like all kinds of different arcs going on. It's a very complex storyline, but by far it's the best. It's like the epitome of Batman stories for me. So as far as like, you know, reading Batman is concerned, I would only ever recommend that one. There's obviously other highly recommended Batman series, but that one I feel like is the best like dynamic duo Batman series, so highly recommended.
Ooh, that sounds good. Did I tell you, have we talked about the fact that I grew up obsessed with Batman?
I forget if it came up. I don't know.
So,
but it's.
I'm not like a serious comic, like I know every bit of trivia, but I just love Batman, and I did ever since I was a little kid. I saw like a picture of Batman on like a Time magazine in 1989, and I was like, who's that? Who's that? And so I went as Batman for Halloween. My parents did not make me be Batgirl, they let me be Batman, which I do now appreciate.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I became convinced that my father was Batman because his first name is Bruce and his middle name is Wayne. And he worked for a newspaper at the time. And, of course, Superman, Batman, what's the difference when you're, like, 3, 4?
Right.
So, I'm all about the Batman.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see it very well, but I have
I see your Robin R back there in your hat. Oh, it's like a shrine.
Yeah, it's like everything I don't know if the lighting is well, but, like, it's pretty much everything I've collected of Robin stuff. And I mean, all my Robin comics are, like, on the bookshelf, obviously, for safekeeping. But yeah, I have a whole shelf dedicated to just Robin memorabilia, because it's been weird because growing up, my brother Adam was pretty into Batman, and I don't know what it was, but I was always drawn to Robin in the comics, and it might have just been the whole, like, you know, there's those 2-player games. Adam's the first player, I'm the second player, but yeah, I think also I just like bright colors. I like the red and green combo, but yeah, I've always been obsessed with Robin, so like I have all of his, and it's always that whole. It's weird because there's like the Dick Grayson Robin that everyone grew up with, you know, and there's like the Jason Todd, but Tim Drake, for some reason, that whole 90s era with like the flat top haircut and the messed up hair and everything. That's who I always was drawn to as a kid. So it's been something that I can't escape.
The Robin of our time. I'm all for that. Yeah. That's awesome. That's fantastic, actually. All right. And then, so we're at number 2, and my number 2 isn't actually, it's a fat fantasy trilogy. It is the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. It is so good. It is
I'm
good.
pretty sure I've heard of that one.
It is one of the best fantasy sets that I have ever read. It is absolutely fabulous. It does a really good job of creating really intense human relationships and conflicts against the backdrop of a world where some people can perform magic and other people feel threatened by that and want to harness it. And
cool.
It's just good. Everyone should read it. I consider it essential. Like, fantasy reading is so awesome. And especially because it has a female main character who's a mother. It really has like a different perspective. And it's, you know, it's really neat to read about, you know, from the point of view of somebody who's a little more seasoned. And not, you know, because I feel like a lot of fantasy books, and I mean, I read them as a kid, and I still read them now. You start with somebody who's young and fresh and starting out, and you go to the academy, or you go to the school, and you grow. And, you know, this is a more kind of adult world novel, if that makes sense. Novel set. Cool. But I like that. I think it's really good.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll have to check it out. I think I've heard the series mentioned before, but I'll have to check it out. Sounds interesting.
Yes, absolutely read it. Download it if you must. Or go get curbside books from Barnes & Noble.
So we're number one,
Number
right?
one.
Yeah, this is where I feel like just the most generic, cliched recommendation ever, because the Song of Ice and Fire, the George R. R. Martin series,
of course,
solely 100% responsible for me like developing any sort of writing chops. I'm not like a great novelist. I'm not a great writer, but I think like when I first started, I was writing my first book, Eve of Corruption, which you can still get on Amazon if you're interested. But when I first wrote that in college, I had I think it was 7 or 8 different drafts going. And when I first got Game of Thrones, it was back in, I think I picked that up like in 2005 or 6, maybe. I think it was 2006, but I was a late comer to the series because it had come out like in 98, I think, or something. The first book did. So I picked up Game of Thrones. I finished it. Right when I finished that one book in this series, I scrapped all of my drafts I've been working on, and I started over. It's like, okay, this is how you write fantasy. Like, this is how you write epic fantasy that I want to write.
Yeah.
So I think, like, to me, with the exception of some fantasy elements. I prefer fantasy elements like different races, like, you know, elves and halflings and dwarves and stuff like that. I always prefer that kind of high fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
But aside from that, everything else about Song of Ice and Fire is like just the epitome of high fantasy, or not high fantasy, but just, you know, fantasy.
Yeah. The
fantasy genre done right. I'm just a huge fan of it. And some people will always, you know, have preferences about what book's their favorite. Personally, I think my favorite book in the series is A Feast for Crows.
I actually agree.
But yeah, it's not the most popular opinion, but I'm glad to hear somebody else shares it because I love that book. The way it handles Cersei's chapters and stuff are just so well done. But I think that obviously that book doesn't really stand well on its own without the series.
Yeah.
So obviously Game of Thrones is like my recommendation because that book will launch you into the series. But I always hate like talking about it because I feel like a broken record because everyone loves it. Everyone loves the TV show. You know, it's like a phenomenon now. But
it's good for a reason, though. You know,
yeah,
I mean, sometimes things are good because they're actually just good. Like, everyone talks about how much they love Buffy the Vampire Slayer. You should. Buffy the Vampire Slayer is a great show. I mean,
it's true. It is.
Some things you should just like. I think I like Game of Thrones as well because it's so historically inspired. So as opposed to the more high fantasy kind of Tolkien influence, you know, if you go read a bunch of stories of European history and kings and queens betrayals and all that, then it's like, oh, okay, yes, I like all the politicking and the secrets and the scandals. You know, that's totally up my alley. So
yeah, I
think I like Game of Thrones for that. Although I know that you can't rush a person's process and that writing is art.
Yeah.
I'm trying so hard to be respectful. Come on, man. Come on.
There's some limits. Yeah, there's some limits to how much. Because it always cracks me up that people will make the excuses of like, you can't rush, you know, genius. I'm like, you know, this guy right here, this guy wrote one book, one of these a year, like, and they got huge. And it's like, he's no less talented than George R. R. Martin. You know, it's just a matter of people's work ethics and everything.
And I am not saying that I'm a genius. I'm a solid writer in an academic style. That I will say for myself. But I wrote my dissertation in a timely manner because I planned what I was going to write, and I got my butt out of bed every day and I wrote. And actually, I got myself into a system where I only wrote 2 pages a day, and then I made myself stop, even if I was feeling it. And I would go research for the next part of the day, and then I would do other stuff. And every day, I wrote 2 pages. You write 2 pages a day, you will shock yourself with how quick you have 250 pages and you've written a book.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I like them. I'm a methodical person, but like not everybody's like that. It's fine. But I'd really like that series to finish before George R.R. Martin does. Just a thought.
Yeah. I try not to hop on that the whole like, oh, finish my book bandwagon.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in the back of my head, it's like, I think you do lose like creativity. I think is very much born from hunger and like, you know, just like a drive, and it's just natural human condition that when you start making millions of dollars and you're the head of this like empire now, you might lose a bit of your motivation to you know, get up and churn out words every day. So I can't fault the guy that. I just wish that maybe he would like hire a team of writers and say, hey, write these things for me, write my ideas down.
So this makes me wonder though. So I wonder about this just along those lines. So can a fully happy and content person make great art?
I don't think so, personally.
I mean,
there's exceptions, obviously, but I think the majority of cases, I don't think that's like because I kind of suffer from this myself, and I'm not that I'm like a great artist or anything like that. But when I was, you know, in my 20s, I was like I was very, very hungry. I was in a band. I was writing a novel. I was doing all kinds of creative things because I had that like hunger. And now that my full-time job is to create games, which is what I love. There's some days where I just, you know, I don't have that drive to be creative. It's more, it's kind of a natural progression where now I'm doing more like logistical things and more business things, which is great. You know, I'm not going to complain about that, but I do notice that it does really reduce the level of enthusiasm I have for just creativity, because I'm almost more at ease enjoying other people's creativity and just like, you know, and playing games and enjoying other people's creations. So in my own trajectory, I could easily see that being the case for a lot of other people who, like maybe George R. R. Martin was just struggling really hard to get something going, and he finally got that series, and now it's like, well, you know, I got some ideas, but I'll get to those tomorrow, you know, type of thing.
You know what's interesting about the fact that you chose that as your number one is that my number one is a trilogy that finally finished, and I waited 8 years for the 3rd book. 8. And that is Hilary Mantel's Thomas Cromwell trilogy. So it's historical fiction. It's set. It's set in the Tudor period. So Thomas Cromwell goes from being this kind of young kid with an abusive dad to like, you know, extremely powerful person under Henry VIII, and he makes and breaks relationships with the king, and he gets policies through, and he handles finances. But it's all done in this way that's just so interesting, and learning about his internal life and the political workings of court at this time is just so deeply researched, sensitively written, well done. The first 2 books in the series, so the first one's called Wolf Hall, so you can get Wolf Hall, and the second one, Bring Up the Bodies, both won the Booker Prize in the year that they were published, and they are both among the better books that I have ever read. They are so good. And then the 3rd one took 8 years to come out.
Jeez.
And so, you know, from 2012 to this year, to March 10th, in fact, I waited. And
that's crazy.
I know, and I'm so happy it finally finished, because Hilary Mantel's a wonderful writer. But, you know, between there was a Wolf Hall show, and there was like I was like, oh no, she's gonna get Martined. She's gonna get Rothfuss.
She'd be too busy counting her money.
No, I actually don't think so. Because she's also, I'm pretty sure she has a chronic illness, and a lot of her life and her creative drive is kind of driven by, you know, her own, I think, physical limitations. I'm not totally sure. I'm pretty sure that is something about her biography. Somebody told me this. But, you know, in terms of her intellectual drive to study and to, you know, learn about people, oh my God, she's so thoughtful and intricate, but it's also just good entertainment. It's a great trilogy. It's literarily great, and it's also great in terms of entertainment. Like, you can read it and not notice that you're reading great literature. Does that make sense? Because it's so interesting.
Yeah.
But I love it. So if you want to do some historical fiction and you like reading about, you know, Henry VIII's crazy wife situation and all the weirdness that he got up to, it's a good thing to read.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Yeah. So, any game news before I let you go?
Game news. I think we've right now. Blacklist, the company, is doing a miniatures Kickstarter, so it's gonna be like we're doing a test run because we're starting this new division called. It's still Blacklist Games, but it's like Blacklist Miniatures, a subdivision of the company. So if it does well, then we'll do like miniature lines based on whatever genres we want.
Yeah.
Right now, we're doing the safe route, fantasy. So everyone loves their fantasy miniatures.
Right.
So anybody who plays like D&D or tabletop skirmish games, and you just want some good quality miniatures, that's what these are geared for. So we're really aiming for like the RPG crowd because the box has groups of goblins and groups of skeletons, so you can just like grab this box and start playing like low-level adventures right away with your D&D crew. So we'll see how it goes. It's going to launch. Don't quote me, but it's April. I think it's a couple weeks now. Let me see. April 9th, I think, or April 10th. Yeah. So we'll be on social media all over the place, though. So if you follow Blacklist Games, you'll see everything about it.
I will. So,
and we also have you had David Thompson on last time.
Yes. Spill it.
We are working with him on something. So we haven't announced it officially yet, but we're teasing it enough on social media. But yeah, we'll have with David and Trevor Benjamin, his design partner. We have a cool project cooking right now. So. Am
I going to like it?
You will, yeah. You will like it. I'm not saying probably. I'm saying you will like it.
All right. I believe you. You know my taste at this point. But that is awesome. It sounds like exciting things are ahead, and I really appreciate you coming on here with me to talk about books because, we're gamers.
No problem. Thanks for having me, yeah.
I thought we'd try something different,
Yeah. I'm glad you thought of me, really.
Well, what was the title of your novel again so we can all go read it?
Oh yeah, if you Google or if you Amazon Brady Sadler, just my name, you might see a couple results because there's a Brady Sadler who's much more handsome than me. He's some guy that lives in New York and he's a marketing guy and he writes like marketing books. But if you see a fantasy novel written by Brady Sadler, it's mine. It's called Eve of Corruption, and it's a Lorengard book, and Lorengard is the name of the band I was in, which is also our album is on Amazon. I highly recommend it. To this day, like me and my kids still listen to it. It's just a fantastic metal album, but it's not like screamy metal. It's like melodic metal, like classic metal. So it's very operatic, soaring vocals, anthematic music, and cool fantasy story behind it. So you can get the book, read the story, and then listen to the music that tells the story of the book you just read. So.
And so you can play a board game, listen to some music, and read a novel that are all fantasy.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, I will let you go. I know that you have the kids at home. And
I have one. I think the other one left for a little bit with my wife, so
Gotcha.
It's a little quieter here luckily. I might get some work done, we'll see.
Go forth and make that game announcement happen faster so you can tell me what it is.
Yeah, we'll do.
Have a good one. And for those of you who are watching, leave us a comment. Thank you so much for hanging out, and happy gaming.